Hey, welcome back to the shop today. It's a rather rainy day outside and dreary, and I've got a couple days in between my work that I can come out here and solve a problem that's been nagging me for quite a while. The problem that I'm having is the lathe is still sitting on the pallet that it was originally delivered with. Now, now, not that we're going to start making excuses, but it's been rather convenient leaving it the way it was because it raises it up an extra 6 inches. And because I'm 6'5", that gives me a bit of an advantage when I'm using the machine. So about a year back, I noticed these 4x8 HSS steel. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking high-speed steel when I say HSS. This is a different type of HSS. Now, the ironworkers will know what I'm talking about. It's high-strength structural steel or high-strength steel. You guys can fact check me on that if you want. And we're going to actually fill that with some concrete and a bit of rebar in it. And we're actually going to lift this lathe up and slide these underneath it. And then off of that, we're going to level the lathe out. What we're going to use to lift this lathe up is this toe jack that I have here. Now, this toe jack that we have here is on loan from one of my subscribers, and he wants to remain anonymous. And thank you very much for lending me this. This toe jack will more than ample lift the lathe that we have. But remember, we're going to have to crib it as we go and make sure that we don't take everything out and completely rely on this toe jack. One of the first steps that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take out all the tooling that's from underneath here. Later on, we're probably going to build a shelf or something for this tooling to keep all the dust off of it, but that's another project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to throw these up on the foam here just so the concrete doesn't flow out the other side. Give them a good smash in that foam. This is the back side that's going to be down, so that'll be facing away from us. I don't really see too much daylight, so that should be okay. Now we're going to grab some tie-down straps and strap this all together because we don't want it coming apart. And full disclaimer, actually, I actually grabbed a stand in the back there. You'll probably see it, and just because it was a little bit too tippy still. So what I've got here is I think it's like a 10 mil rebar. It's basically just a cheap rebar that I got off of Facebook Marketplace. And already bent to a 90-degree angle. Now I'm going to put the reverse L's, if that makes any sense. I'm going to have an L on the bottom of it, and then I'm going to have an L the opposite way on the top, and then a piece in the middle. And then I'm basically just grabbing standard post-paste concrete, and I'm just going to pour it in there. The concrete's really just acting as a buffer, just to stop a bit of the frequency and vibration from kind of transmitting onto the floor or vibrating and reverberating back into the machine. Physics really, I guess. So now I'm just going to slide this rebar into the bottom, probably about 3 inches off the bottom. Keep in mind, in a minute, I'm going to tap it with a hammer, and it's probably going to slide a little bit further down below. Now it's starting to really kind of come together. Let's grab a hammer and let's actually tap that a bit, get a bit of those air bubbles out. And what we're really going to do is we're going to seat it and make it look actually really good on the other side. Because we set it in that foam, it's almost going to be like sand casting, where it's going to pick up that nice surface finish of the foam. Now, if I had been a wittier fellow, I think on the next one when I do the grinder, I'm going to do this, is I'll probably put my logo, my Right Machining logo on the back there. And it'd be a nice touch actually to it. And even if it's stuck in the foam, I mean, I could probably hit it with a MAP gas and burn that foam off, and it'll look pretty good. Let's slide to the single rebar of scrap in there, and then we'll grab the L brackets and slide them in as well. Now, let's slide these 90 degrees on. Now, these 90 degrees, I'm actually sliding the opposite way, if you remember how I put the other one on. Now, remember, this is super important because later on, unless you want a big chunk of that concrete breaking out, it's going to really tie it all together and hold the ends on and give you that damper that you're looking for. Now, for any of the concrete finishers out here, this is probably super painful to watch me use this piece of scrap. But you know what? In the end, it really does work, and you'll see a good product in the end. We're getting the air bubbles out, and then remember, you also don't want to overwork the concrete, or you're actually going to have a lot of the water come to the top and your aggregate sink down below. But I think this is going to turn out quite well. Okay, so I've got her all put in here now, and I had a bit of a break in the weather, so I mixed the concrete outside. But you know, it's not ideal that I did it in the shop, but I didn't want to risk getting this all wet. The next step that we're going to have now is we're going to let this set up. Then I'm probably going to wire wheel it tomorrow morning and give it a coat of paint. And then I'm going to let it set up for a total from now till when I put it underneath, at least 48 hours to give it its full green strength. I might even let it go for 3 days. So we didn't have to be overly too specific where the concrete went. I mean, really, we're going to hit it with a wire wheel, and it comes like flying right off there. Full disclaimer, no guard, no face shield. If you're going to do this kind of stuff, make sure you do have your face shield and stuff. Now we're going to paint her up with a bit of Jobber Princess Auto gray paint. I would have liked to gone to a little bit darker color, but this is what I had in stock. And you know what? Maybe when I do the grinder, I'll have a better color for it. So this is where it's kind of funny because normally you probably want to lift the lathe up with a plate and take the pallet out. But this was actually really frustrating because I had no idea how I was going to get it off the pallet. And the only real true way that I could get off the pallet is literally cutting the pallet out from underneath it and then using some of itself of the pallet to crib itself back again. So the first step is I'm just going to cut that shelf off, I'm going to pull it out, and then we're just going to kind of assess it from there. This was the best part of the project for me actually taking the shelf out and seeing what was kind of hiding under there. And two of the things that was hiding under there, one of them, believe it or not, was a 10 mil socket that I've been missing for years. And the second, believe it or not, was space. In a 20 by 20 shop, space is such a premium. And to be able to open it up that much more, to put some like grinding stones and what have you underneath there is kind of essential for this shop. So you're also going to note as I'm unbolting everything, I'm going to crib stuff. I always had each corner at least one piece of cribbing, if not two, if I was lifting with the jack, because 3 reasons. I mean, you always need a backup plan in case that jack's going to bust, because it is a machine and you can't always trust a machine like that. And 2, it's a small shop and the chances of me getting away if something went wrong would be pretty small because, man, I'm just kind of wedged in that little alleyway there. And number 3, I mean, it's super obvious. This machine's really expensive and we don't want to break it. So let's just slide that cribbing in there and make sure we're safe the whole time. Now, while I was kind of doing this job here, I totally forgot that I had these feet hiding behind this machine. And man, what a blessing in disguise, because I actually thought I was going to have to make these, but it's working out quite well. Let's continue jacking this up, sliding the cribbing out, and then we'll get her all leveled out here in a minute. Man, these riser blocks really turned out quite nice, and I'm very, very happy with how they turned out. They've got a nice color to them, and plus those feet that I found behind the lathe, they actually gave it an extra inch rise on the whole machine. So it's a bit more of an advantage for me. Now, if you don't have a toe jack and you have a similar situation like I have here, I did think long and hard what I would use as a secondary kind of lift for this. And I do have a car jack that probably would have worked. It's like a low profile one from Princess Auto. It probably would have worked as well, but the toe jack, I mean, you just can't beat it for moving it around in a small shop. Now, I'm just going to flip this over just because I was kind of being a little bit meticulous here, and I wanted the seam actually facing up because for some reason on the seam side of this concrete, it had a bit of a rock in it. So on the down side of it, it didn't have the rock on the floor. If you know what I mean, it had a bit of a dish to it on the top. So that was probably the better way to go, I think. Now let's get to the meat of the whole video. This is leveling the lathe, and this is where I'm going to put a lot of the bulk effort into showing you how I do this. This stone here is this, I think I bought this stone a few years ago from Home Depot. It's like a knife sharpening stone. And this is, I don't think you need anything special to clean up your tabletops if you have, you know, burrs or whatever sticking out. Just as long as you're going in a figure 8 pattern and you're watching your wears and you're not really gouging it up too much. What we're doing is we're taking these high points out here and wherever else you're going to have them, because you don't want that level rocking off of them. Plus, you're also going to have to clean everything up super good because you don't want to wreck that level bottom or have that grit underneath it to kind of throw you out. Which there isn't. So now that I've stoned off the top here, and I've got the level on here, I'm just going to take a quick reading from front to back. I'm just kind of curious more than anything, really. So as I lift this up here, you can definitely see that it's probably about, I'd say 3/16 of an inch just across this 10 inches that it's out. We're going to move on to leveling out the lathe from the headstock to the tailstock. And what I'm going to look for is, I don't actually want it level. we're gonna have a little bit of a slope to it, just like this. So all of the stuff runs from the front to the back into the sump pump. This is gonna be relatively simple. I'm basically gonna put the level on here. I'm just gonna lift it up a little bit to see how much it's out, and then we'll have an idea how much we're gonna have to take out of it. Okay, so what I'm finding on the level here is I actually have to lift this end of the machine up just a little bit more, and it's about 1/8 of an inch. Now, if anyone here at home is getting a little bit anxious about doing this yourself, I would actually encourage you to do it. It's relatively simple. I mean, within reason. I mean, you can do things to wreck it, but I think you really have to go out of your way to do that. So remember, at the end of the video, I'm going to recommend a couple other guys to check out their YouTube channel. You can't go wrong if you follow all the directions from all the guys. Let's jump down here and we'll get her fixed up. So it's relatively simple. We backed our tops off, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to wind this here up, just coming up a little bit with each turn. And then at the end of it, we're going to go back up there and we're going to check it. But I'm going to move this one here 3 turns as well. And then we're going to go back over and check to see what our level's doing. All right, let's check the level and see how we did. Okay, now without touching the lathe, because if we lean on it, it could change things. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, our next move here is we're going to take this off of here, and we're going to put it on the cross slide over here, and we're going to give that a check. Remember, cleanliness is key here. You wouldn't use a dirty micrometer to measure anything. Why would you use a dirty machinist level? So make sure everything's super clean, and especially when you put this away as well. So this is out a little bit, but that's not a big deal. Before we get too worried about that, it's actually relatively simple. You see, both of those screws are made to the same pitch, correct? So in theory, if we turn both of those at the same time, it'll move it the same amount. So we're gonna have to be really careful to move it exactly the same, and then we'll probably come back and check our slope after, but pretty easy stuff, right? Let's give that a whirl. First, let's take these clamping nuts off. They weren't that tight, so it shouldn't affect much of our original reading. But we'll have to back these off before we think of moving anything. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to do it 2 turns at a time, and then we're going to check it. So we're going to do 2 here, 2 in the back, and then we're going to check our level and see what it looks like. Okay, now those 2 turns actually gave me quite a bit of reaction. I'm actually relatively close here. So now I'm just going to start going maybe a quarter or a half a turn at a time, because if you look at the dial, it's actually started to move a little bit, and it won't take much for this to move. So we're just going to go, let's go a quarter and see what it does. Now, okay, now full disclaimer, I didn't go a quarter, I went a half. So we're gonna have to go the other way just a little bit here now. I went about 1/8 of a turn there, and then I saw it shoot across when I jumped up there and took a look quick. So now I'm gonna go back about 1/2 of the 1/8. I'm gonna go back that 1/16 of a turn. And we're gonna jump up here and take a look. Okay, now there's no reaction. Now there was no reaction on that. So I'm just gonna go a 1/16 up over here. Now you see, look at that. Now you see, look at that on the dial there. I'm within 2 thou of it right now, and I'm just gonna move it to get it right on. Now, this isn't gonna be where it sits, because I'm gonna move this cross slide back and forth, and then we're gonna take the twist out of the bed. throw this GoPro up here, and then I'll just start to move it back and forth here, and you can see exactly how this is going to change as we go from the front to the back. Now, up in here, it's actually straight bang on, and that's probably what we're looking for, but I bet you it's going to change when we get to over the other side. Okay, now what I did forget to mention in all is once I set this level on here, I'm not going to be playing with it or leaning on here, remember, because that's going to throw us off. So now we're quite a bit over here. Now the bubble's over on this side here. So if I was to push this level down, it would make the other side higher. So I'm going to lower this foot down here. We're going to see what that does, but we're going to go really, really slow here. Now, I'm only going maybe a 16th or a 32nd of a turn, and you can already see it reacting there. I'm going to do this again over here. Another 16th over here. Another 16th. All right, now it's moving. Okay, perfect. It's right in the middle there, but I bet you dollars to donuts. If I move this over to this other side, it's still going to have a bit of a twist in it. Yeah, that's right. We still got a bit of a twist in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this side here up just a little bit. We're going to see what that does. Oh boy, we're only within 2 thou here. So this side's gonna, the bubble's on that side. So we have to push this side up for that to work. And it's not gonna be much. Now you see it slowly starting to move there. Now this is getting us pretty close to within what I would say an acceptable range is here. But let's move it over to the other side here. Let's give it a look. We're still out 2 thou. Let's move it one more time and see if we can take this out. The bubble's over there, so we got to lift it up, and we got to push it down. So we got to go down just a bit. And you know what I'm actually going to do? I think we're actually close enough that I could probably tighten down those feet and start greatly affecting it. And then I'm going to start tightening these ones down. And I bet you I could probably adjust it by tightening that bolt up a bit. And that'd probably be enough. Oh, just even tightening that bolt down there made a difference, didn't it? So I'm going to go up from the other side, tighten it into that bolt. Okay, we're at 1 thou away from us. Now, if I didn't say this before, these weighs, they got to be absolutely clean for you to be doing this and in decent shape. Okay. Now we're 1/1000 out. It's going to crawl down. Then we'll go a 16th of a turn the opposite way. That's actually bolted up super nice and tight now. Let's jump back up here and have another look at this. Okay, it moved a bit now, didn't it? We're bang on the money there. Let's pull it over to the other side. Do you know what? If I'm within a thou, I'm probably going to be reasonably happy with that. Would you look at that? We're within a half a thou now. So what I'd recommend to you is, after you're done this, you're gonna go back to it in about maybe 2-3 weeks after running it. Your lathe goes up to temperature, cools off. You're just gonna have one last revisit on it. Now, I bet you, I bet you dollars to donuts, all of the pads and the weight of where the machines sit, your ground's gonna shift a little bit. I know you got a concrete floor, but when you really realize everything's kind of plastic, especially what we saw here today, we could actually see the twist in the lathe and take that twist out of the lathe. Now the ground's gonna just settle a little bit here and there as well. And then we're gonna go back to it, and probably in about 3 weeks, you've probably settled out enough. And you can go back to it and you can get that twist right out of it. And then you're gonna be dead set. And it's maybe something you might go back and check once a year, or a maintenance thing. Every time you do maintenance on your lathe, once a year, change your oil or whatever your maintenance schedule is. Okay, so the next step, which isn't included in leveling the lathe, is checking your tailstock and your headstock. Now, these aren't something I'm going to show you today. However, I'm going to leave you the links down below for one of them, my favorite, Inheritance Machinery. This guy does a phenomenal job on showing how to level a lathe and goes into minute, extreme detail in how to do this all. And I always like to fact check anything I watch on YouTube. So that's check it with 3 sources. So you got my source, Inheritance Machinery, and I'll actually throw 2 more links down below for guys that are leveling lathes that did a really good job of it. And don't forget, the cost of admission's a thumbs up. And if you got any comments, good, bad, or the other, I'd like to hear them, and we'll catch you on the next one.